Hey everyone, welcome to the HR and Leadership Spotlight Show. Every employee deserves excellent leadership. Every employee deserves that. I love that quote, but it's not just a quote or just a concept. It's actually a quote from my guest today, John. And John, I see for our viewers today, John Thalheimer. How do we say your last name, John?
It's actually John Thalheimer. The first H is silent.
John Thalheimer. So John has a master's degree in organizational leadership. He is an international speaker. I know he speaks around the country on leadership, on HR issues. He is writing a book, and he understands the impact that poor management has on organizations. I am excited today to bring you John Thalheimer.
Correct.
For our viewing and listening pleasure. John, you know, first of all, welcome, John. I just want to welcome you.
I'm glad to be here. I'm excited.
Excellent, excellent. So our logo, obviously, is a coffee mug with the microphone in it. Some people think it's a robot, but it's actually a coffee mug. So talk to us. Did you bring anything for us today?
I did. I brought a mug today. It's funny because I don't drink coffee, right? And so I'm not a big coffee drinker, so I'm not a big mug person, but I did find, if we can get this here in front of me, up there, too far back, there he is. This is my high school mug from high school. And the reason I brought it is because we had a saying in high school, we had Latin, it was finis parte something labor. And what it means is we finish our labor to just begin anew. And if you think about management and leadership, it really is, it's a consistency that we always need to be striving to reach that next level. And so I really learned that in high school. That was our motto. And we really kind of, like, you never finish, you're always trying to improve. We're always trying to get better. And so I think that really sits where I'm at today. And like that quote you talked about, having great leaders in our organization is really important.
I love that quote. I love the fact that you still have your high school mug even after 3 or 4 years since grad. Well, no, it has to be longer than that. You've got your master's degree. Well, tell us about your journey, John, because I know you, and I know you're coming to us from Nashville, Tennessee, right? But I know that you travel a bit. I know you are on the seminar circuit. You do you teach classes. You write books, you coach, you have your coaching certificate. And so I obviously have laid out, but tell us, how did you get to where you are now? And who is John Thalheimer?
Yeah, I love my story. Maybe that sounds a little egotistical, but I do. I love my story because it's not your normal journey. And I think a lot of times we find ourselves caught up in like, okay, so I have to do this to get it this way and this way. And my path is much more circumstances, I don't know what the word is, but really just different. And so I started in theater. My goal at the time was to be a lighting designer on Broadway. I wanted to be a lighting designer on Broadway. And so from there, I did scenic design, I did lighting design, I did production management, I did stage management. I did that until my mid-30s. When, as you can imagine, theater doesn't pay a lot. My mom was like, well, maybe it's time you go out and make some money. And so we had that conversation. So then I got into what I call my lost years, but I worked in manufacturing, I worked in retail, I worked in hospitality, I worked in entertainment. I did a lot of different things and got to see all these industries and how they worked. And then I finally settled at QVC. And so at QVC, I started on the production side. And so I did a lot of production, and then I moved into studio operations management. I did crisis response management. And I ended up in the talent department. And so, like a lot of us today, I got laid off. After about 20 years with the company, QVC laid me off. And so it was sort of like, okay, so what do I do now, right? I had that like, what am I going to do now? And I really started thinking about it. I went back and I really looked at what my personal vision statement was. And I said, what do I want to do? Where do I want to go? And so what I realized my passion is how can I help managers and supervisors, that middle manager, how can I help them be better at their job? And so I started TrueStar Leadership based on that premise is I believe every organization and every employee deserves great leadership. And how do we get there and how do we do it? So that really is my journey, and I love it because I get to take, you know, when I'm speaking, I get to use my theater background. I get to use all those things I learned in theater. And when I'm doing a workshop, I get to learn all those experiences and say, hey, this is what I did and this is how I did it. And so it became this great thing and really just kind of wraps it all together. So I love where I am in my life right now.
Awesome. Yeah, and I can see that as you sometimes disappear into your background, right? But that's okay because I love your logo and I love your I love the 3-word phrase of your company, True Star Leadership. Can you just kind of expand on what is that from? Where do you get that from? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, again, there's always a struggle to name your company. How do you name it? What's the right way to name it? And I really wanted to focus on who are those stars in your organization, right? Who are those stars and can we make them leaders in your organization? And so True Star really comes from that direction, true north. And so what's the right way to go? And so we all have that star that will guide us. And I'm a really believer in not coming in and telling people how to do it, but to stand next to them and guide them and go, okay, so how would you do it? What's the benefit of doing that? And really getting into their mindset and going, okay, so how do we do that? How do we reach our goals? And so really it's that guidance becomes really important to me.
All right. So when you're out there and you're serving organizations, like what are you doing to help these organizations create success? The organizations that you are serving, that you're working with, you're consulting with, what's your key? And I know early on we talked a little bit, and you talked about a Gallup poll and a survey about the most significant lever to improve overall effectiveness of that middle management team. And I like the fact also that you're focusing on middle management. So I know there's multi-levels to the question, but can you speak to that?
Yeah. And so let's start with the book, right? And so Gallup has this book out. It's called It's the Manager. And so it was great. I got the book, and it was one of those things that I was reading the book on a plane, right? I was flying to do a speaking engagement. I'm reading this book. And there's not often when I'm reading a book that I agree with everything in the book. But as I'm reading it and I'm going through it, I'm like, yep. And like all those things came to me. And so they have this, their research, right? And Gallup does this wonderful job at researching organizations. And they have this database of like 42,000 organizations and millions of employees that they've interviewed. And so they looked at what is the thing that makes people successful at work? What makes organizations successful? And what they found was it's that middle manager. And so what we should all be doing is paying attention to that middle manager. And I think a lot of times when I'm working with an organization, they have leadership programs for their executive teams. They bring in coaches. They do all this stuff for them. And then they spend a lot of their own energy on the frontline employees, on orientation, all that kind of stuff. And that middle manager is in the middle, and they get lost. One of my friends said that the typical person gets promoted when they're about 30 years old, and their first leadership they get training is when they're 42. So think about that. There's that 12-year gap that I want to fill in and go, hey, we need to improve people there. And so when I go to an organization, when I'm looking at an organization, I go and we use what we call the True Star Leadership program or process. And it's really a 7-step process. And it's so simple on one hand. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, it's not, right? It's not. It's really not easy. And so the first thing is we need to know what we want from our managers. What are our expectations? We need to define that strategically and go, what do we want our managers to do? What do we want to accomplish? And then we need to evaluate them. We need to sit down and go, okay, what are they doing really well and what aren't they doing compared to that? And so how do we evaluate them? How do we get to that place? And then we've got to build their knowledge base. And then the other thing that we do, which is different than a lot of organizations that come and do training, we actually do what I call focus practice. And so that is actually getting those employees, the managers, to do the interview questions, right? So we give them a scenario and say, okay, you're going to interview this person. What questions are you going to ask? Okay, you're going to discipline this person. What questions are you going to ask? What's that going to be like? And we get them to role play that. That's the focus practice that I don't think I see enough in training opportunities and workshops around the country. And then we design the proper systems. What are the proper systems, right? And so this, for us individually, it's the habits and routines we have. And so every morning when we get up in the morning, my wife and I will walk the dogs. And I got to say, the hardest thing for me is self-discipline. And I've been really struggling with this. And so that getting up and walking the dogs has been great for me because it sort of forces me to go, okay, now I'm starting my day. Right. Well, otherwise, I'd probably be sitting here right now, kind of watching Netflix and kind of kicking back, right? I would be doing those things.
Not you.
Me, yes, yeah, I would. And then creating that personal accountability, right? And so that may be getting a personal accountability coach, and maybe setting up a mentor program, whatever works best for that organization. And then always at the end of this, and always I want to make sure that everyone understands this, we have to be willing to ask for help. Because we just don't know the answers, right? We need that guide to go, okay, so how did you get there? How did you get there? How can I get there? And I think one of the things that I found in my life is when I talk to managers and I talk to supervisors, they're lost. They don't know. They don't have that guide. They don't feel comfortable going to anybody in the organization because I may be looked at by not good because I don't have the right answers right now. And so that's really what I've been focused on. That process really helps people go, oh, that's what I need to do.
Right. So, I love the Gallup books. The first book I read, First Break All the Rules, was a book. And you read management books, and a lot of times they're on theory and philosophy. And all of a sudden I'm like, wow, their theories, their statements are based on facts and based on their surveys. So I wrote that down, folks. The book's called It's the Manager. So if you want to look that up, I don't think there's any endorsements here that we get for throwing that out there, but that is definitely. So, when it comes to, so you advise companies, and then you advise managers and such. But if it were an employee, and that's another thing that I want to throw out, just that you had said, is I'm always struck by how many times people get to a certain point, and we promote people in organizations, and because they're a great employee, and then they make supervisor, but there's no supervisory training. So in a couple of weeks or months, I hear, oh, we have to get rid of that person, or we have to demote them because they're a horrible manager, they're a horrible supervisor. And I'm like, well, did you give them any training? What tools did we give them? How did we help them? Right? So I don't know, do you see that out there where great people are promoted and they just don't succeed because they weren't given that opportunity? Or what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, I mean, it happens all the time, right? I mean, we promote a subject matter expert. You're the best at your job. And I always go to fast food, and I apologize, but I always go to the fast food, right? You have the fry cooker. You're the best fry cooker. You do the French fries fantastic. You know what? We're gonna promote you to shift manager. Well, that doesn't mean they have the necessary skills. And so we have to build those skills in and go, okay, so how do we do that? How do we train them? How do we get them to take the next level? And are they willing to put the effort in? Because management is a skill set. Leadership is a skill set that we can all learn, right? We're not just born with this. It's something that we have to learn. And so I think that becomes really important to make sure that we're telling everyone, hey, you can learn this. These are skills that you can learn. And so it becomes really important to understand that.
Right. So when it comes to skills, and let's say I am the fry cook and I want to get in management, and what is the one skill that pretty much every employee needs, based on your research, what's to be effective at work, and then to be able to set themselves up for success, to move into some sort of management and or leadership?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I always think about this. So I've started studying successful people. And when I originally started studying successful people, I went from what my parents had told me growing up. To be successful, you need the right education level. You need to have the right circle of influence. You need to have the right social and economic background. And as I studied successful people, I realized that none of those by themselves are going to make you successful. And so I started going, okay, so what does make people successful? And so I believe that it's this ability to make the right decision at the right moment to move ourselves closer to our goal, right? And so decision-making is the one thing that I think we look at every position in our organizations, that if you don't have good decision-making abilities, you're not going to do well in any position. And if you do, that means you can succeed in any of those positions. But we have to think about decision-making, because it's decision-making isn't, oh, I'm going to make a decision. Decision-making is actually a process. Right. And so the first part of that process is to know where we're going, right? That ability to strategize and going, okay, so I'm making a decision to get here, or I want to go here. I want to bring my team here. And so that's really first. And then second is this awareness. And we talk a lot about this in EQ and emotional intelligence and being self-aware. But it is really important in our everyday work. If we are not aware of what's going on around us, we can't make good decisions. And a lot of times we're making decisions without thinking through the process. And so we have to go through that process and really think about that. One of the things I always think about is each of us comes in with our own perspective. Right. That's how we make decisions. And so that's why I love the team atmosphere and kind of getting people together and go, okay, so what is the right decision? And then the ability to evaluate is part of the decision making. Can we evaluate well? And then finally, the execution part and making sure that we do it well all becomes really important. And so you have to tie all those three together. When you have that decision-making ability, you can do all those things really well. And maybe I'm not a great executor. Maybe I'm a great leader and I can get the ideas, I can make the right decisions, but I know I'm not a good executor. That means I need to hire the right person to do that, right? I need that operations manager to come in and do that. And I worked as an operations manager a lot of time. Mm-hmm. And I would get so frustrated with these leaders because I'm like, that's not the right decision. I'll execute it really well, but it's not the right decision because they weren't strategizing enough. And so that just comes back through that process.
Right. So it sounds like, and I know earlier we talked about that you work with organizations and companies and with their poor management, but how often does someone just say, you know, I'm not hiring you for my organization. I need a coach. I need a coach. Is that the type of stuff that you do also?
I love working with individuals, right? Because if an individual, and so Marshall Goldsmith, the #1 executive coach, always says, like, it's our job is to hire the best clients. Right? And we want to get that. And so if somebody comes to me and says, I need a coach, that means they're willing to improve. A lot of times I'll go to an organization, right? And I'll talk to the human resources leader and they'll be like, hey, we got this guy. He's a great person, does a great job, but he's not really doing great at his job. Would you coach them? And so I go talk to this person and they're like, I don't want to coach. Well, I can't do anything. If they don't want me to do it as a coach, I can sit there and we can meet every week or every month, but they're going to be like, yeah, no, I didn't do anything. And so that, right? So that gets very aggravating. And so you want to go in, you want to have that conversation with those individuals and go, hey, so when somebody comes to me and says, oh, look, I need help. I'm not really sure. I need an accountability coach, or I need this. I'm not really good about creating my own personal vision statement. How do I create my own personal vision statement? And so we have conversations about that. And then we evaluate them based on, okay, so here's your personal vision statement. Here's where you are now. What knowledge do you need? What focus practice do you need? What systems do you need in place to be successful? And so I love coaching individuals when they're willing to be coached.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. I have met people that have excelled in their careers, and every once in a while when you ask them, well, you know, what were the components that went into this soup of success, right? A lot of times they'll say, well, they're either readers, right? I've heard leaders are readers. Yeah. So they read a lot and or they talk about, I had an executive coach, and I see that more and more these days, as opposed to several years ago. And the interesting thing, John, is people are okay to admit that. It's not really a weakness. It's almost seen as a badge of wisdom that people are saying, look, I brought in an executive coach because to help me with some of my blind spots. Yeah, so I've always been impressed with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think everyone needs a coach. If you go back, and so think about your favorite NFL quarterback, right? And so if you have your quarterback or NFL quarterback or any of your sports figures, you know that they have a head coach. They have an assistant coach. If it's a quarterback, they have a quarterback coach. They probably have a physical trainer as a coach. They probably have a health eating expert coach, right? They have all these individuals helping them because they don't have the knowledge. And these coaches are going to help them have the knowledge and then also give them some guidance on, okay, here's the things you want to do. You know, when we get to that level, when we're at a leadership level, the small things that we do are going to make a big difference. Mm-hmm. And it's not like you can kind of stumble through when you're a first-time supervisor. You can stumble through and go, well, that didn't really work. You're going to have somebody kind of help you okay, no, we'll correct it over here. But when you're a leader of an organization, you need to have an executive coach. And I'm glad that you're hearing people do that. Definitely, we want more and more people reaching out to coaches and finding the coach that's going to really work for them.
Yeah. So when I talk about leaders or readers, and that's a quote I've heard on and off, you're writing a book. Yep. So tell me, just share with us, and I know the book's not done, the title, the working title is called A Manager's Field Guide, a how-to guide for managers. What is that? What is the how-to? What is the field guide approach? Just share that. I love that. I think of myself almost like a roadmap. It's a book, kind of like the field guide to hunting or fishing. Field guide to coin collecting. The field guide to antique shopping, just things that are coming to my mind. Yours is a field guide for managers. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, and so I had this thought about a year ago, is that if I'm a manager, what do I need? What tools do I need to make good decisions? And I'm a manager, right? We have to understand that managers are now swamped, right? There's not a middle manager that's going to be like, oh, I got a lot of extra time to go do reading. I got a lot of extra time to do these things. And they don't. And so they want a resource guide where they can literally go, oh gosh, I'm going to have a hard conversation with somebody. What do I do? What should I prepare? How do I prepare for that? How do I do that? And so that's what it is. It's really that I want to be able to open the book and go, okay, here's my question. How do I answer that? And so that's the guide, right? And so it becomes very easy, that kind of stuff. My problem with the writing is I write too much. Right? So I'm trying to go, okay, that's too much. I need to narrow it down so they can have it and go, okay, yep, got it. I can move on and do it. And so really working on that. And that's really where I've been probably in the last 6 months, is taking what I've written and going, okay, how do I write a coaching one? And how do I do that so I can help managers coach them through that process?
I like that. So, you did talk about decision-making capability is really critical to an employee's success. And I've heard that theme, if I'm correct, right? I've picked up on that decision-making, your book is going to help people make decisions. Your coaching helps people make decisions. I know personally that you teach day-long classes on HR, employment law type classes for new HR people, and you talk to them about making decisions. All right. So, but how do you measure that? If it's critical to an employee's success, how do you measure it?
Yeah, right. And I think it was Peter Drucker, don't quote me on that, who said, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. Right. And so if we can't measure a person's decision making, then how are we going to improve it? And so I got to partner with this True Start Leadership, my company got to partner with this other small company out of Chattanooga, Tennessee, that has an evaluation that they created that has all this data. I think now they have over 1 million people in their thing. And so we know that it works, and we know that it really does. And so this assessment, what it does, it allows us to evaluate an individual on 30 different indicators. And it sort of talks about, okay, so what kind of decision-making are there? So we always look at the way we base our decisions. Are we a people person? Are we task-oriented? Or are we strategic? And so what we look at for leaders, we want them to be both strategic and people person. The task thing needs to go away. Unfortunately, what happens in organizations, those task people move up in the organization, and the people person or the strategic person gets knocked out. And so they've created this assessment where I can go in and I can evaluate an individual. What I love about it is we can evaluate a candidate. So it's been approved by the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, to actually use it for candidates. Because we don't talk about race, we don't talk about gender, we don't talk about those things that they would be worried about. We give them this assessment. It's a 2-question assessment. And it comes back with all this data on that individual. And we can say, yes, they're a perfect hire for your company, or they're not a good person for your company. And then we can use it in mentor situations. And so what we want to do is find a mentor that has a strength that the mentoree doesn't have, and then match them together. A lot of times we're like, well, let's get this person because they're in the role you want. They'll mentor you. Well, if they both have the behavior that's holding them back the same, that mentor is not going to do them any good, right?
Yeah,
and then you're going to create mini-me's of that person, and that's not going to help you. And so doing that, and then we also use it for leadership, we use it for wellness, we use it for safety, because it has all these indicators that we can look at to do that.
Right.
So I love using it. It's fantastic. It's one of the best things because it actually measures it. And so what they talk about is, we talk about like personality assessments, right? DISC, Myers-Briggs, all those, and all those are lagging indicators.
Okay.
So they're looking at personality. And so that's a lagging indicator. It's not over there. And so judgment is a leading indicator. And how we make decisions is going to influence our behaviors. And so if we're stressed out, we're not going to be making good decisions. We don't have good problem-solving skills, we're not going to have it. And so this assessment allows us to see those indicators and go, oh, okay, so what makes sense? And so that's really where I'm looking at.
Yeah, and I want to point out to the viewers, so the important thing about the assessment that you utilize as a tool is that it's validated by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So you don't want to go out creating things unless they're absolutely validated, because you could inadvertently discriminate, right, based on race, religion, that you don't know. So that's the one thing I got from what you said. But the other thing is, people say, well, I could just do that myself. I can find an assessment. They're out there. But it's not just about the assessment. It's about the interpretation, right? And bringing everything in and then helping someone utilize that tool to grow. Correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And we go through this assessment company literally has us go there. It's a 3-day. I just went back through and did a refresher, but it's a 3-day course. And we go through every one of the indicators and we talk about how does that influence somebody's decision making and what do we need to pay attention for. And then every other week, we literally have a class on one of the indicators or what's a hot topic. And so we've been talking a lot about diversity and tolerance. And so how does that play out? And does the assessment show that? And it does. It has a clear indicator on people's tolerance to new ideas, new people, and all that kind of stuff. And so we can look at it and go, is this person going to be tolerant of those things?
I love that.
And then we also have a safety assessment that comes out of this that we can see, do people notice things, right? And so if you have a safety position and that person can't notice little things, that's not a person you want to hire.
Yeah.
And so that becomes right. And so understanding that really does take time. You can't just go, oh, I got it. And so now it really helps to kind of have somebody to be your guide to go, okay, come in and do that. We love coming in and doing teams, right? We'll do the evaluation for everyone. We'll get their evaluation, but then we'll have this big team meeting, maybe 3.5 hours in the morning. And we'll talk about the indicators and what they mean. And then we'll show like, okay, so there's probably some stress here because we have people that are really good at problem solving and we have people that are good at problem solving. Well, there's probably tension there. Or we have other things. And so it becomes this great crucial thing to kind of be really looking at.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. So we're getting down to our time, but I want you to talk about who is your ideal client, and if anything you said today resonates with any of our viewers, how could they get in touch with you? So let's talk about who's your ideal client and how could those folks get in touch with you, and what would be the experience if they did?
Yeah, and so really the question to ask yourself is, are you happy with your managers and the performing their jobs, right? Are they meeting your expectations? If the answer is yes, congratulations, you're doing a wonderful job, keep at it. If the answer is no, then reach out to me, because that's what we do. We want to make sure your managers are doing their job. And maybe you have great leaders, maybe you do. And maybe you're like, gosh, we want to take it to the next level. And so I love this assessment to take it to the next level. We would come in and do individual coaching and go, okay, so where are you with this, right? And so we can do a lot of different things. We can come in, we can do the full, okay, we're going to come in, we'll do an assessment, we'll figure out where you want to go, and through that whole True Star leadership process. We could just come in and do coaching. Maybe there's somebody in your organization that's really subject matter expert. Everyone really likes them, but they're not performing well. And so I can come in and do coaching with that individual. And what we do, we'll do it all virtual right now, right? We do it virtual and we'll set it up. So we'll meet once a month, but we'll have accountability calls once a week. So we know, okay, so how's it going? Well, you know, we'd ask those questions. There's 3 questions we always have to ask. What's going really well? What's not going well? What are you going to change in the future? And hold them accountable to that. And so that's the other thing to do. And then I just come in and I love speaking. You know that. I love coming in and doing speaking engagements, keynote speakings. And maybe you just need that person to come in and just kind of get everyone going and kind of focus on decision making. So let's have a keynote. Let me come in and do an hour presentation for you, so we can talk about that with your team and go, okay, so how do we do that? And so the best way to reach for me, I got to be honest, is through my email, which is John, John, at johnthalheimer.com. So that's JohnThalheimer.com. I'm looking at my name on my board to make sure I'm spelling it right. It took me to 3rd grade actually to know how to spell my last name right. Or they can go to my website. It's truestarleadership.com. Check it out. You'll see some videos. You'll see some great stuff in there. We have a leadership resource page in there. Lots of good information in there to kind of check out. You can see a little bit more about the assessments we use. I also do social emotional intelligence assessments, so that's in there, so you can kind of get in there as well. See what's best for you. Then reach out to me. Email me is probably the best way. I'm probably going to get back to you faster than calling. Just in this day and age, I'm not that great.
Right. Well, I will put all that information in the show notes. I love the virtual thing. You're coming out of Nashville. I'm in Orlando. Yeah. We have corroborated on a few projects, and we're virtual. And the tools out there, you have a national reach, probably international. Absolutely. Correct, John? Yeah. So you can reach anyone.
I mean, with the virtual tools, right? And I remember, so Chuck, I don't know if you went through this experience. Actually, I know you went through this experience because I was there when you went through it. But when we moved, right, both you and I are out doing speaking engagements across the country. When we moved from that to virtual, it was like, okay. And then we started doing it and we're like, oh, yeah. We can have the same conversations. We can have the same interactions. We can have those things. I love using Zoom. I use GoToWebinar. We're using Microsoft Teams. It's just that ability to have that conversations and good speakers. And those people that are doing training out there, we're going to tell you, you have to make it interactive. That means you have to ask them questions. You can't just be there going, blah, 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 and spitting everything out because they're not going to learn. And so having that interactive, asking them questions, having them posting it in there or having them raise their hand, putting them on their microphone, that's going to get them engaged. That's going to make them happy. And so we've been doing that. I know Chuck does a great job when he does that as well. So.
All right. Awesome. John, did I catch everything? Is there anything else you wanted to throw in there or add? Have I touched on?
No, I think we did a great job. I mean, of course, right. This is one of those conversations that you and I could probably have all day.
Right.
Right. And we could come back to it and have conversations about it. But what I want everyone to think about is, one, are your managers and supervisors meeting your expectations? And I know, because I talk to HR managers and HR directors around the country, and one of the questions I ask is, how are your managers performing? And always it's like, eh. And if it's like, eh, what Gallup tells us, right, we'll circle back to Gallup. What Gallup says is, their research clearly says, if we do one lever to improve our company's performance, it's focusing on the middle manager. If we get them to improve, we get everyone below them to improve, and actually we get the people above them to improve as well, because they start seeing how impressive these simple skills are that they're using.
That's great. John, Thalheimer, thank you for joining us today. Folks, it's the HR Leadership Spotlight Show. If you are an HR professional or leadership professional and you have something to say, you want to get the word out, go ahead and contact me. I'd love to have you on the show. This show is brought to you by Alliance HR Partners. GetHRHelpNow.com. GetHRHelpNow.com. I'm Chuck. I love HR. I hope you do too. And until we next meet, John, take care. Folks, see you on the next episode of the HR Leadership and Spotlight Show. Thanks, everybody.